Hello, in this video I will be reviewing the 10th book in the Rangers Apprentice series, The Emperors of Nihon-Ja. I think it's just The Emperor of Nihon-Ja, actually. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Oh, just a disclaimer, this video will be absolutely infested to the gunnels with spoilers. So yeah, just with that out of the way. I think if we just get a quick summary of what I'm going to say out of the way, this book is really good. I think it's one of the highlights of the entire series. I think that it has a fun setting, a cool kind of plot, like all the great characters still there, plus some cool new characters, entirely new culture to explore, while still kind of incorporating the stuff that made the previous books fun. So it's just kind of this beautiful combination of new and old in terms of the series in such a great way that I really think it just sort of pops off the page and it works really well. So yeah, let's kind of get into some more specifics here. So if we start with character, we've still got all our sort of normal, kind of standard recurring characters. Obviously, Will and Holt and Horace are all here, but it's slightly done in a slightly different way because we start with Horace split off from the team, so to speak, and then kind of obviously spoilers. The plot of the story is him going to go rescue Horace after he gets sort of entangled in this big rebellion thing in Japan. Sorry, Nihon-Ja, and so I think that this really works because we get kind of that thing we had in the second and third book, where we got one group of characters going to rescue another character, and it's cool because we kind of get to see both their perspectives and we kind of get to see them like converging on each other, which I think just makes for a kind of a compelling, just a compelling style of story because you know where it's going and you really want it to get there, you know what I mean? So you just kind of feel like they're getting ever closer and it's quite fun in that way. So yeah, so we've got our recurring character Horace, who I think is just, he started off cool and he just gets better and better over the course of the series. And it's really fun to see him kind of in his own right as an adult, doing his thing in Japan, learning from them and stuff, and then really kind of taking sort of responsibility and just really being a bit of a Chad. He's just a massive beast, Horace, and I really like him. It's just kind of fun to see. And you can argue he's a bit of a simple character. He's basically just a generic good guy. Perhaps even a bit of an audience self-insert is kind of the idea with Horace, I guess. But honestly, it works, and it's just fine. It's just fun to see him be like a wholesome, competent person being wholesome and competent. It's like, it's just good. I just really like Horace in that way. And then, of course, we have Will and Holt, who they just sort of bounce off each other in such a great way. Like I've touched on previously in these reviews, their banter is just really, really good. And it's just really fun, like I said, them bouncing off each other. But in their own right, they're kind of interesting characters, because Will is kind of like the, perhaps the other audience self-insert, like the more, obviously courageous, kind-hearted, sort of more wholesome self-insert. And then Holt is perhaps, and as we kind of see, spoilers for the next book, actually, no, I won't do that, but because you would have clicked on this not knowing I was going to spoil the next book, so, but yeah, so, like, Holt is kind of the more sort of humorless version, and perhaps maybe some older readers might relate to him a little bit more, sort of, slightly more dry, humorless, less effusive version. So all these kind of characters, kind of, between all of them, you kind of cover all these spectrums from just total good guy, sort of banterous good guy, like, dry good guy, we kind of cover that whole spectrum. So that really works, and it's fun to see them bounce off each other. And then we've got our kind of semi-recurring characters of Evelyn/Cassandra and Alice, all kind of returning. We kind of get to see them, the big kind of soup together. And then it's kind of fun as well, because we've also got some of these slightly, they're not really recurring because it's the first time they've recurred, so to speak, but these kind of characters who we've seen previously in the series. So we've got Silly Elfin from Eric's Ransom, who's just here. And it's kind of interesting because you can kind of tell that he didn't necessarily need to be here. But I think the author was like, he's fun, let's just chuck him in. And you know what? I'm here for it. I like Silly Elfin as a character. I think he's cool, and I think it's fun to just have him back for round 2. So I had absolutely no problem with that at all. And yeah, him just hanging out was great. So I enjoyed that a lot. Just having Silly Elfin there, and then of course we had I think his name is Niles. Good, I can't remember his name, but the Scandian captain from Siege of Mackendor and Sorcerer of the North is back, and he's just fun and cool. We don't get to see him a lot, but he's there. And then we've got the new Japanese, Nihon-Ja characters of the Emperor, Shigeru, and then his kind of like, I guess his like bodyguard / assistant, Shukeru, who is also his cousin. And these guys are just really cool characters. Once again, they're just kind of wholesome characters. Just generic good guys, but it just works, I think, because it's just kind of fun to see good people be nice sometimes. So they were quite fun and just kind of interesting new characters to toss in. It was fun seeing like having a bit more face time with a ruler, because we kind of touched on King Duncan before, but you don't see too much of him, you just see a bit of him, and it's always fun when he's there. So it's kind of nice to have the Emperor be more of a central character to the story, so I really enjoyed that. And then we just get kind of some of the more sort of brief appearances from other Japanese characters. Like we get, I forget his name, but the guy who's like one of the Kikori scouts, the dude, he's just like a boisterous, fun character. You kind of see every now and again, and you're just like, oh, that guy's fun. So yeah, characters in this are really great. I just want to quickly touch on setting as well, which is not something I normally talk about too much in these Rangers Apprentice reviews, because it's, normally pretty much the same, it's just Britain. But it was really cool to go to Japan here and just kind of see a different, still medieval, they're still using swords and bows and whatever, but just to see a different place, they're kind of fun seeing these characters who are very British, sorry, Araluan, kind of interacting with this new culture, and I thought that was really fun. And kind of seeing, obviously the points of difference and stuff, like the paper walls, which Horace keeps tearing through and stuff. I thought that was cool. And then, of course, the culture side of things comes into that as well, where it's not just the physical setting, but it's also the cultural setting, like all the, the culture clashes and just seeing how they interact. And obviously, we get a bit of that direct comparison as well, where we talk about, feudalism in Europe versus Japan. And it is interesting because I think, and just a small criticism here, the feudalism that is put forward in Rangers Apprentice is a much more wholesome, docile type of feudalism than what feudalism actually was, which is a really shitty system, particularly if you were a serf. So there's a couple of comments where it's like, oh, things in Japan are so hierarchical, not like in Araluan. And I get that this is a fantasy story, right? And so, John Flanagan can make feudalism whatever he wants because it's a fantasy story. But I will say that because it is so close to our real world, statements like that they just feel a bit like, you're like, really? Was feudal Europe that egalitarian? They just feel a bit, they just hurt a little bit. But like I say, of course, it is fantasy, so you kind of have that thing where it's like, well, he's not really saying that feudal Europe was great because he's not actually talking about feudal Europe. So yeah, just getting that out of the way. So yeah, that's setting and character. Plot. Now, this book has a very sort of simplistic plot. Which you could say for a lot of Rangers Apprentice books, but that is not a criticism really at all, because it really means that we know exactly what's going on, we know exactly how we win, we know exactly how we lose, and we just go and have fun. So, so there's obviously, there's a rebellion in Japan, Horace kind of gets sort of caught up in it, and he has to escape. Him and the true Emperor have to sort of escape, and fight like sort of a resistance force in the mountains. And then, of course, the way we win is that they win they beat this guy in battle, and the way we lose is we die. You know what I mean? So it's very, very simple. And then we kind of just get our other characters inserted into that because they're like, well, we don't want Horace to die. We like Horace. In fact, in Evelyn/Cassandra's case, she loves Horace. So, we don't want that to happen. Therefore, we need to go help them. So it's a very, very simplistic plot. And it kind of ends sort of in the way you would expect. They win the battle. We get a slight curveball in the sense that the enemy's forces end up kind of surrendering because they don't actually want to fight anymore because they sort of realize they kind of have a, are we the baddies moment, and they're like, oh god, we are the baddies. So it kind of ends in a slightly different way to them just straight up winning the battle. But the point being that the entire story, we kind of know where it's going, we know where it's going to end, but we just enjoy the journey. And speaking of that, I will say that just the preparations for the battle I think were so cool. I thought it was just really fun kind of, when I see the Roman legions at the start, and they're like, oh, Roman legions, eh? And then they kind of use that to prepare for the battle. And I just had a great time with it. And obviously this book is a little bit of a copy of, obviously, the Battle for Scandia, which is the exact same thing, right? Where it's like, oh, we need to take part in this foreign nations battle because else we're going to die, and it's bad, so therefore we need to help, and therefore we're going to come up with a strategy of organising them in such a way that they win the battle. I mean, it's basically the exact same as that book, right? But you know what? I loved that book. I thought that book was absolutely fantastic, so you know what? I don't mind. And of course, it's not, it's sort of been reskinned enough, so to speak. We're in Japan instead of Scandinavia, we're with Japanese people instead of Scandinavians, we're fighting samurai instead of Mongolians, you know what I mean? So it's like, even though it is, like I say, a very, very similar book, it is kind of like it's enough of a reskin that you can just enjoy the great book all over again, you know what I mean? So actually I had no problem with that at all, just something to point out. And then, I guess the last couple of things I want to touch on are just the couple of, romances between, so we have the Will and Alice romance, and then the Evelyn and Horace romance. And I'll say with the Evelyn and Horace romance, I'm a bit more forgiving of, because even though we don't get to see too much on-screen chemistry between the two of them, you can kind of understand, because they spend a lot of time together at, in the capital, they're both there, in the Castle Aralu, and they're both there hanging out, and presumably they had, tons of great times, and now they want to get married, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm much more forgiving of that, because it's like, I can very easily visualize in my head what would have happened between them off screen, and therefore I'm okay with it. And so, when there was that proposal at the end, I was kind of like, oh, it was a bit sort of kind of out of nowhere, we haven't seen much of this on screen, but you know what, it's fine, look, it's a good vibe. But I will say that I do have some criticism of a Will and Alice romance, and I'll touch on this a lot more in the next video when I'm reviewing the Royal Ranger, but I will say that it's one of those things where they never really have any on-screen chemistry together, in my opinion. They just kiss once, and it's very sort of stilted and awkward. And we don't really give that much indication that they're spending that much time together off screen. So when Will's like, yes, maybe we should do that, you know, maybe we should get married, it's one of those things where it's like, well, like, where did this come from? I don't... And I'm not saying, you know, that there couldn't have been anything there. I just felt like we needed more. We needed some more time with him together. So the only indication we really get that, you know, Will and Alice are into each other is just the fact that Alice is jealous, right? But we don't get to see her, so we get to see her talking about how much she likes Will and stuff to other people, and in her mind. But we never really get to see her actually interact with Will in a way that indicates that. So I just sort of thought, I just kind of was like, I was a bit sort of disappointed with that, and I felt like it could have been done a little bit better. But yeah, I think I'm running out of things to say. I don't know if there's too much else to say. I will say there's kind of a subplot which I sort of forgot to mention between so when Evelyn / Cassandra and Alice go and they like recruit these like sort of wild men kind of people to help with their battle, and I just thought this whole subplot was really, really weird and could have just been totally cut, and the book would have been better for it. So we've got these like, I think they're called the Hanzu or something, who are these like sort of hairy, big people who live in the mountains and are loyal to the Emperor, but we never see them, no one's ever met them or anything, but they're loyal to the Emperor, and then we just need to go recruit them to come help the Emperor and everything's going to be okay. And it sort of felt to me, kind of, you know how in Lord of the Rings, both book and film, there's the army of the dead, and Aragorn needs to go like recruit them and they'll help with the battle that's otherwise going to be kind of inevitably lost. I kind of felt like that sort of thing, where it was like a little bit of an ex machina that just like happens to be this great force that no one's ever used before, just happens to be there. And I felt that this was, you know, so it's just one of those things where it's like, wow, you know, it's perfect, you know, if it just happens to be, you know, 10,000 or 1,000 great fighting men that just are there, cool. And also beyond that specific sort of ex machina concern, it's also just really weird. So there's just like a bunch of hairy, giant men who may be, like, it's never explained, are they human, are they not human? They seem to be like 9 feet tall, so probably not human, covered in hair, like, are they like, and like, is he trying to imply that there's another race of humans living in Japan that like no one knows about? Like, it's just very odd and out of nowhere and kind of random and weird in the story. We've never had any indication of this before, and so it's just like, and then of course you think about the practicalities of that, right? So imagine you live in a country, right? I live in New Zealand, for example, right? So I live in the North Island. Apologies about that. But yeah, so I live in the North Island, right? And so imagine there's just in the South Island, there's just like a big group of people living in the mountains who are loyal to the New Zealand government, right? But no one's ever met them. We can't even verify that they really exist. They probably exist, and they might be human, and might not be human. But somehow they're loyal to the government. Do they pay taxes? Probably not, because no one's ever seen them. So, you know, must not be any tax collectors there or anything. So no one's ever seen them, but they may or may not be loyal. We know they're loyal. Like, you know what I mean? None of this stuff makes sense. How do we know they're loyal if we've never met them before? How do we know they're there if we've never met them before? How do we know they're even human? We don't know any of this stuff. It's just totally random and out of nowhere. But I will say that I don't want to end this review on a kind of negative note where I'm just I'm talking about something bad about the story, because this book is really, really good. I think it's absolutely one of the highlights of Rangers Apprentice. I love all the characters being together. I love the new setting. I love just the cool battle that they have, and I like all the preparation for the battle. And I really, really think this book absolutely pops off the page, because before we get to battle, we have these two sides converging. We're like, oh, when are we going to meet up? When are we going to meet up? And they finally do, and it's great, and it's absolutely a fantastic book, and I really could not recommend enough. Please ignore that giant rant I had about that weird subplot, because even though it is a weird subplot, it kind of comes out of nowhere. It's still a great book, so yeah, would recommend.